Greetings, everyone. It's Mike Yao with Savage Kingdoms role-playing game and Fire in the Head Productions. So, thought I'd do another video today about Savage Kingdoms, which is why I sort of led off with saying Savage Kingdoms and not necessarily Red Sun, although that's the other game I've been working on. So this is just a relatively quick announcement that I will, in fact, be going forward with the next edition of Savage Kingdoms, despite a video I posted like 2 or 3 months ago that I was going forward with Red Sun, which I am. So to clear up the confusion, because I'm still behind on a Kickstarter for Savage Kingdoms, it's called the Savage Kingdoms Heroic Adventures supplement, which is I'm now like almost a year behind on. That's going to be part of the next edition, the 4th edition of Savage Kingdoms. So yeah, so there'll be a brand new core rule book, brand new rule system. Not brand new, I mean it's still Savage Kingdoms, right? So it'll still be pretty familiar to everyone. There'll be some changes and tweaks, which I've done in a past video. And maybe I'll make another one soon going into more detail. Trying to get more traction on this channel. There's a little frustrating. Not really as many people as I thought would be kind of engaging here. I know these videos are kind of boring. I don't use a lot of fancy graphics. I don't edit. I do everything in pretty much in one take. It's just me rambling, but hopefully me rambling has some decent information if you are interested in any of the games or any of the stuff that I do. So just real quick right now, so I've been really busy. This is audition system season for theater. As an actor, I do stage and film, but mostly stage. And right now, it's like kind of audition season. If you are an actor yourself, you probably know what I'm talking about. So I've been busy doing that with callbacks and stuff. And so far, it's been pretty good. I've booked a couple of fight choreography gigs as well, because I also do that as well, and some other stuff coming out, hopefully, and my wife as well. So we'll be kind of busy with that. But once this sort of audition season, as it were, the beginning of the year kind of clears up, I'll have even more time to dedicate to Red Sun and Savage Kingdoms, particularly Savage Kingdoms, which is what I'm mostly talking about today. So yes, it will be. Last year I was calling it SKX. If any of you have followed the videos or know me personally, you know that's kind of what I've been referring to as the next Savage Kingdoms edition. The reason why is because it was the 10th anniversary, so I was using X as a Roman numeral X, 10, and plus Savage Kingdoms X might have sounded cool, maybe kind of sorta. I was never completely sold on it, but that's kind of what I was rolling with. But it won't be called that anymore because we're now in the 11th year of Savage Kingdoms, and calling it the 10th anniversary edition a year late is kind of weird and odd. So that's probably not going to happen. I'm still looking for an official title. It may just end up being Savage Kingdoms 4th edition, which I don't really like because it's kind of connected to, in people's brains, Dungeons and Dragons 4th edition, which is to me a bust, and to a lot of people. So, I don't know. I was toying with calling it Savage Kingdoms Re-Risen or Reborn, something like that. And it was kind of in a reference to, so I live where we were heavily impacted by Hurricane Helene here in the sort of Asheville, Western North Carolina area, as many of you probably know. So, naming the game kind of inspired on that event. It sounds kind of cool, but then again, I don't want to, I don't know. We're all just trying to recover from that thing and maybe just kind of moving on. However, I like the kind of the victory message of reborn and re-risen as I hit the camera. Apparently, that was the jiggling. Um, so I don't know. We'll worry about that later. So titles usually come later with all kinds of, whether it's stage, film, games, or whatever. You might have a working title, and then your official title really doesn't come in often until later. Sometimes it's the thing all the way through. Not a big deal right now. So, but there will be a 4th edition. I realize this will be the 4th edition in 11 years of the game's existence. I know I've probably gone over this before in past videos. That's not necessarily a bad thing. It sounds like that's a lot of editions for a tabletop role-playing game in 11 years. And on one hand, it is. But the caveat to that is that if you are a major publisher, if you're Dungeons and Dragons or Pathfinder or Savage Worlds or something like that, you don't need an edition every 3 years, 3 or 4 years, because it's a big brand. Everybody knows about it. People will go out and buy it. They don't really necessarily care about what edition it is. Hence why people are still purchasing 1st edition Dungeons and Dragons Second Edition. In addition to those being really solid systems, the more I play modern tabletop role playing games, I now see why a lot of people like the older versions. Honestly, a little more challenging and sort of gritty, and there's less bells and whistles. However, there's been some really good improvements with modern tabletop role playing as well. Like anything, if you progress with something long enough, one would assume you'll make some innovations. But just like how culture exists itself, you might take 2 steps forward and take a step back. So anyway, that's neither here nor there. It's not really what the video is about. It's about Savage Kingdoms. Speaking of which, so we'll probably kickstart this thing. I'll probably do a Kickstarter in a couple of months. Again, I'm trying to clear out of audition season and some other stuff and getting through winter and all that kind of stuff. I also don't like to do Kickstarters right after the holidays. I think most people will agree. People are recovering financially from Christmas and the holidays, etc. So I think kickstarting March is a really good time. Summer is not pretty good, and autumn really there's not really a bad time except for immediately before and after the winter holidays. Um, But yeah, I'm kind of looking at March or April. If I end up pushing it all the way to May, I'm going to kind of connect it to my birthdays. My birthday's in May, and I'll sort of do this thing where I'll post on social media like, "Hey, if you want to give me some birthday love, like contribute to the Kickstarter." I know it's really cheesy, but it's probably effective. I guess I think I've only done that once, and it was relatively effective. But maybe something like that. So look forward to the next game. Red Sun is still playtesting really well. The weird thing is that it's probably like I've tried to gather all my data from Dragon Con, the RPG camps that I run. Now, granted, those are younger players, but it doesn't mean they don't have very valid criticisms and feedback because they do. In fact, it's really cool. I've probably spoken about this before. When you've got playtesters and when you're getting critiques back from any kind of artistic thing you're doing, or really anything you're doing, make sure you have a sampling of all ages and experience because you'll get a lot of cool various feedback that you can kind of average together and kind of make a conglomeration thereof because your product is probably going to be purchased and consumed by more variable groups than you think so. So I know we kind of live sadly in this age of echo chambers and tribalism, and people don't tend to listen to people beyond their tribe or grouping, which is very sad. Unfortunately, it's kind of how it's become. But do so. Ignore those modern trends and listen to people that might have a different opinion from a different age group or a different experience level, a different gender, different whatever background there is. That's very helpful. So, collecting all that data together from my younger players and some older players at Red Sun and kind of in between with Red Sun and Savage Kingdoms, Red Sun is actually, I think, play tested a little bit better than Savage Kingdoms, which is why I was kind of on this RS Red Sun kick for a while of getting it possibly kickstarted next. But mainly because I still have that obligation to fulfill with the last Kickstarter. Um, I think it's smarter to go on with the next edition of Savage Kingdoms, and I think it's about time. It's been 11 years. It'll be 4 years since the third edition, SK3. I've made enough innovations, I think, on the new game without being too different. But I think I've made some pretty cool. I've tightened it up a lot more. It's pretty excited about it actually. I'm also very excited about Red Sun as well. So pretty happy about both. Mainly because the feedback has been pretty positive, or if it hasn't been positive, it's been worthy, right? It's been worthy of what's being said. So that's the thing with criticism. It's like it's fine to have negative critiques of things, but they need to be useful critiques. Like if you're giving someone kind of negative feedback, make sure you're doing it from the heart and you're doing it for a reason instead of like slandering people. Not that that's happened. I'm just saying, like in general, I see that online with other people. Um, so yeah, so it's good to learn from both positive and negative feedback, assuming it is constructive criticism. Yeah. So the next edition of Savage Kingdoms will be, while I'm on the subject, not to drag the video out too long, because mainly it was just an announcement that I'm going forward with SK4 or whatever, SK Reborn or something. I won't call it Reforged because that was the second edition, which technically was a 1.5 edition, but you know, everybody kind of refers to it as the second edition of Savage Kingdoms. Savage Kingdoms Reforged. So I won't be calling it that for this one, which is a shame because I really like that title actually. Anyway, we're working on a title. We'll figure that's kind of the least of our problems right now, but it's nice to know that the logo is still there. I still really like the logo that Mike Maurer designed years ago. So we'll be kind of going with that with marketing, the color schemes that we've been using, predominantly red with some black and gold stuff going on. Red Sun was going to be similar, but leaning more into the like crimson red kind of thing as far as marketing goes and logos and that sort of thing. Right. So I guess that's about it. Like I'm trying to think. I feel like I had one more thing. I didn't write outline of notes for this video, which I usually do. Actually, it doesn't seem like it, but I do. What else can I speak about other than having to just make another video because I don't do enough of these, honestly. Well, just know that it is coming on. I'm still working on it. Oh yeah, I guess I can report on that. So the Savage Kingdoms, the new SK4 rules are about. I'm probably 85 to 90% done with them. Probably closer to 90. So I've already got playtest documents out to some of my friends and playtesters. And that document has, you know, about 85, 90% of what will eventually be in the core rule book for the system. And so my plans is to release, I'm going to do the same model as I did with Reforged, speaking about Reforged, the second edition of Savage Kingdoms, wherein the core rulebook had the East and West. So in the original model of Savage Kingdoms, when I first published it in 2014, wow. Yeah, 2014, yeah, 11 years ago. It was, and some of you might remember, so there was like the core rulebook, which covered kind of the west part of the known world, Astagonia, and that's the main, like, kind of Euro influenced or inspired continent. And then I released the Savage East later on when the game was doing pretty well. Like it did reasonably well on Kickstarter for a small indie game. Inspired me to write the second one. And that covered the eastern part of the world because I had a whole rest of the world already designed from years ago. I just had to add more detail and stuff, as one does when one is world building. And so, and then when Reforged came out, the second edition, I decided to combine both of those books, the East and West, into one, which is why that book is so huge. It's actually nearby. I should probably grab it, but so that's why it's really thick. So it was a little thick, which is a little annoying physically, but at least it had it all in the one book, which is really cool. And then I eventually released the Bestiary, so that was kind of like the second book. But that line, and this is another reason why with an independent game, you want to assuming you want to continue with the line at all, you have to kind of re-release your core materials like every 3 years or so because it will get forgotten. I've learned this from experience from not only doing my own stuff, but seeing countless of other indie projects where after the first book, 2, 3, maybe if it's really strong, maybe 4, like the line peters down. And this is true with the big things too. Like for when you're, if Dungeons and Dragons is a good example. You buy the player's handbook, which is what most games would call the core rulebook. And then the next purchase is like a little bit smaller, and then the next one. Not as true with D&D because the 3 core books have been like a mainstay of Dungeons and Dragons since 1979. Where they had the Monster Manual and Player's Handbook and Dungeon Master's Guide. So they released originally in the first edition of AD&D, they released the Player's Handbook, then the Monster Manual. People think it's the Dungeon Master Guide. It was the Monster Manual, then the Dungeon Master's Guide. Now in the new D&D, they kind of flip-flopped the last 2, but that's actually how it was. Just speaking from an old school person who was there. But anyway, my point is, once those core rule books are out for Dungeons and Dragons, sales go down, but they still do well because it's a giant property, right? So it still does well, but it does percentage-wise per capita, it does drop. It's just how the industry is. So when you're an indie game and you're already in your core rule book, sales are already 1/10,000th of D&D or Paizo or 1/100,000. So you're already dealing with fairly low numbers, and then your next book kind of drops down, and then so on. So that's why I've never continued any of these edition lines beyond like 3 books at the most, or 2. I think maybe 3. I guess Reforged had, well, no, those 2 books in the one and the bestiary. Then the first edition had 2. SK3 had 2 books. The third book was going to happen. That's here. Well, it is Heroic Adventures, but now it's going to be. I'm going to have to redo it. I've already done most of it, or some of it. I have to redo it into the current rule system because I do think it's a marked improvement on third edition. I still really like SK3, and I'm very proud of it, as previous editions. But I think this SK4 is going to be. I mean, you just learn more as you do the game, and you not only acquire knowledge and experience, but you, as a real person, as a creator, an artist, as it were, you learn, you kind of change as life goes too, and maybe you have slightly different approaches to things, and I think that's really cool. I think like game design is kind of an art, and game mastering is an art, and like any other kind of art, every 2, 3, 4 years, 5 years, the trends might change slightly. You as an artist may change slightly, etc. Hence why we have SK4. And the reason why is, again, to kind of restart the line. I think improvements have been made, and we'll see. Like SK3. I might have mentioned this in past videos, or I might have mentioned to friends. Honestly, in my head, that was it. That was the third. I was going to move on, which is why I designed Red Sun. But recently, even though Red Sun is playtested probably slightly stronger than SK, SK still playtested pretty well with people. I think Red Sun was probably playtested a little bit better, not only because I think the game mechanics were pretty unique, but I think mostly because it was something different from me or whatever, from Fire in the Head Productions. And not necessarily that it was just like so incredibly amazing and far more beyond Savage Kingdoms. I mean, essentially it's the same setting. The game mechanics are very different. The dice mechanics are different. But other than that, and one is kind of like classic Frank Frazetta, Sword and Sorcery, Red Sun, and Savage Kingdoms is, I tout it as Sword and Sorcery, but it's really more. I mean, it is mostly. It's definitely a high fantasy, but it's like a Dark Ages inspired thing, whereas in Sword and Sorcery is more of like an Age of Antiquity. And I know most people, if you're really into the fantasy genre, you probably know what I'm talking about. Most people that are casual fans of fantasy or fantasy gaming probably don't really know what the difference is, or even care. But in my headspace, that's how I keep track of it. That's how I see the two games as how they affect the world of Torion. Um, they're very, very different in my head. Very, because it's like 3,000 years difference. Of course, the challenge is filling in those 3,000 years of back history, which I have a decent amount of, but having to put more in there has been actually quite interesting, and that affects both games because one is back history, right? One is history, and one is future or potential future. Who knows? Perhaps it can be changed in the earlier game, which is Red Sun. All right, so I'm kind of rambling at this point, but I wanted to announce that will be coming. Please look for it. Try to support. Thanks to everyone that supported the previous Kickstarters. That's been awesome. You guys are amazing. A lot of you are still with me after all these years. A few people have fallen out, which is, and that's understandable. People get involved in different things and stuff like that. So, but anyway, thanks for hanging in there. And I'll give you more of a actual date for the actual Kickstarter here in the next month or two or whatever. And I'm trying to make it bigger this time. SK3, I did really try to kind of make it big, and it seemed like it was a bit of a wah wah. I had several people I gave free copies to that were going to review it, and I never saw any reviews. I think I saw one, whereas the previous editions got reviewed pretty decently, which is really cool. And again, that plays into why I almost just canceled the line in general, as I feel like just interest, it just like nobody really cared anymore. Part of that is probably true, but the people that care about it, the loyal fans are still really loyal, and so that's kind of inspired me to kind of go on. So that is inspiration for doing the 4th edition. Hi, kitty. And my black and white cat, Nymeria, of course, Game of Thrones, is at my feet there. But and also because I kind of owe that, I need to finish that project, that Heroic Adventure. So I'm very excited that will now be attached to the new edition, which makes it for me as a designer more inspired because I prefer using the new stuff from the playtest SK4 stuff that I'm working on over the past stuff. So yeah, makes it easier to write and design. So anyway, thanks for hanging in there. That's my announcement and my bit of rambling per usual. And I'll talk to you guys again soon. Thank you.